Welcome again to the consequences of binge drinking. And to introduce myself, my name is Kathy Schwartzhoff. I'm a certified prevention specialist at Helping Services. And I've been at the agency for 29 years. I've been a certified prevention specialist for 25 of those years, and I've been doing mentoring for around 23 years. So that gives you an idea of me. Also, I have a husband, 3 grown children whom I'm very proud of, and love to garden and especially love to work with flowers. So that's a bit about me. Dan, can you share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm Dan Marx. I have been in law enforcement now for about 25 years. Spent the last nearly 8 years of that as a Winneshiek County Sheriff. I have one son in high school, a senior in high school. I have another son who is active duty Air Force, stationed out at Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota, and going to get to see him home on some leave here coming up here this week. Get to see him over Christmas a little bit, so I'm excited about that. And I'm actually I'm a board member of Helping Services. I recently got on that in the last 6 months or so, and worked with Kathy and known Kathy for years. And we've done a couple other trainings together, and excited to do this one as well. And the way I understand it, Kathy is going to more or less call the game, and I'm going to do the commentating. So we'll see how it goes.
There you go. Great. So we're going to go ahead and give you an overview of kind of where we're headed today, and just some things to keep in mind. You're welcome to use your video, and many of you are already doing that. Some of you aren't, and that's fine. It's just your choice. You guys are great so far about muting yourself. That's been wonderful, but we do want you to unmute when you've got something that you want to share. And you can turn your video on if you want to at that point, but you don't have to. It's up to you. The presentation is being recorded, so know that that is happening, so that anything that you do say here is part of the information that's shared with others. So keep that in mind. But we do want things to be lively, and there definitely to be discussion. And then we will be sending you materials, including the PowerPoint and the actual video that's recorded, if we have your contact information. And I see there's some folks that did not pre-register, so that means we don't have your contact information. So if you could either put that in the chat and tell us your name, your role in the community, and your email that you'd like the information sent to. And if you're not comfortable putting that in the chat, because some people don't want everybody to see that, my email address is at the bottom of the slide, and you can send me an email and just send me that same information so that you get all of the materials that we'd like you to have, that just kind of help remind you and review what you learned today. So those are things to keep in mind as we progress through today. And then to kind of give you an idea of, sometimes people ask us, why is youth mentoring doing anything related to this topic? And we just want to be sure that folks understand that youth mentoring at Helping Services began a long time ago with roots very deep in substance abuse prevention concepts. And so we always feel that the kids in our program need to make good choices related to using any kind of substances. And we want to, as this slide says, to help navigate the kids away from risky behaviors. Now, I do have to mention the picture to the left. He's kind of doing a risky behavior, hanging from a tree kind of thing. Going down a zip line, down a huge telephone pole that was like, I swear it was 3 feet high. It was huge. And but he's got his safety gear on. And it's a really good capturing of we in mentoring can help kids find some of those risky behaviors that are safe to do and give you that natural high versus substances give you a high that isn't natural and can lead to unhealthy behaviors. So that's a little bit about youth mentoring. I'll give a shout out to Colleen McCann, who is another mentoring coordinator, and also want to have Sam Jennerjohn, who's at Delaware County, share just a little bit more about youth mentoring to the folks on the call today.
Yes, thank you, Kathy. Just a little bit more about youth mentoring and a little plug for here in Delaware County. We serve ages 6 to 16, and here in Delaware County, we are growing our school-based programs. I have recently matched some kiddos in Mac Valley, more trainings in EdCo, and received more for our after-school program, which is for West Delaware. All three school districts have school-based, we have community-based, and then West Delaware has the after-school program. Each of these are great opportunities to volunteer in the community. And here and up with Kathy and Colleen, we are always searching for mentors. So if you or anybody that you know would like to volunteer and help a youth in the community, please reach out to us.
Thank you, Sam. That was great. And we up here in Howard, Alameda, Winneshiek do have both community-based and school-based mentoring opportunities and that. And some of our schools have school-based, not all of them. So just to give you an idea of that. And people can be a mentor if they're an individual, a couple, a family. So just reach out to us and we'll get you hooked up with the next steps with that. So some things to kind of share about where we're headed today as far as what we're going to review with you. And my mouse isn't seeming to work. There we go. We are going to define binge drinking. We're also going to look at adult and youth prevalence. From time to time, we'll have some true false facts and things for you to consider, and then discussion about a kind of sticky situation that could occur, or something that's similar to what could occur, looking at those consequences of binge drinking, how they relate to one's health, career, and relationships. Dan will take over talking about the law. And then I'll come back with where to seek help, and that may be throughout both of our presentations, and prevention strategies to keep in mind, not only for an individual, but also for community-wide. So that's where we're headed. To just jump right in, the definition of binge drinking, and you can see here from this slide, and first I need to ask, because on my screen there's a bar that's kind of in the middle of the excessive alcohol use thing. Do you guys see that? Is it blocking your view?
Kathy, on my screen, it's not. I can see the slide just fine.
Okay, super. That's good to know. So you can see from this slide, there's a definition of what excessive alcohol use includes, and that is heavy drinking and binge drinking, and then the definitions are here for that. And this is a definition from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And there are different sources that look at alcohol use in our nation, and they all have a little bit different definition, but the two main things related to binge drinking are that the amount that's consumed is part of the definition, and the matter of time is part of the definition. And everybody, no matter what group it is, has the same number. So when we look at women, the definition of binge drinking is that consuming 4 or more drinks on an occasion. For men, it's 5 or more drinks on an occasion. And where that number of drinks is the part that stays consistent with each of them. As I said, this is the Center for Disease Control. The National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism also further defines that 0.08% or higher is considered binge drinking. And then two, they look at that occasion as being in about 2 hours. So that's what their definition says. SAMHSA, which stands for Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, they say that an occasion is within a couple hours of each other on at least one day. And then Monitoring the Future survey defines binge drinking as having those drinks in a row in the past 2 weeks. So like I said, there's a little bit of variance in the definition depending on the group, but those numbers of drinks consumed stays consistent with each of those different entities who do research on alcohol use and misuse. And talking about those how many drinks constitutes binge drinking kind of lends you to say what is considered a standard drink. And this is just good information to know that the different types of alcohol that are available. Wine, for example, has a 12% alcohol content. So 5 ounces of wine is considered to be a standard drink. And then seltzers, and even like wine coolers, those types of drinks, you can have 12 ounces of that particular type of drink because that alcohol content is much lower. And then liquor is the one that has the highest content, and that is, whiskey, gin, tequila, vodka, rum, those hard liquors, and 1.5 ounces, or there's a 40% alcohol content. And in this picture, it's kind of a little bit odd from the sense with all that ice in there. I believe this is 1.5 ounces, but with the ice, it makes it look like it's much more than that. And then beer has the same alcohol content as those seltzers, with the 12-ounce drink being the standard amount of drink, and there's 5% alcohol content there. And I will say with the seltzers, it does vary with what you're drinking, and you should be able to see that on any labels. And another question that people have when we get to this part of things generally is, what about ciders? What about the brewery kinds of drinks? And those all have a variance in how much their alcohol content is, and most of your servers can tell you what that alcohol content is. And so you just really do need to be cautious of how does that drink affect you, and how much you are drinking in a time. So at this point, are there any questions or comments that you have so far? Okay, I'm gonna keep going, and please stop at any point if you've got a question or concern. So
I've got a question for you.
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Back to that last slide.
Uh-huh.
You had that glass full of ice.
Uh-huh.
Does the ice dilute the alcohol content because it's water?
I know that water is definitely part of things like, for example, if you're drinking and you take in water before or after, that helps your body absorb things. So to me, Paul, that makes a lot of sense that the ice is another form of water.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if anybody else of our professionals that are on have any different comment than that. Good question, Paul.
Yeah, I guess, for the little bit that I mean, it's certainly ice is certainly frozen water, but for the little bit that would go into a drink like that, whether you're drinking your drinks on the rocks or drinking them neat or, you know, whatever people prefer. I'm not into I'm not a chemist. I don't know as far as the actual chemistry behind it, but I can just say based on our experiences of things when we've dealt with intoxicated people, I haven't noticed much of a difference, to be honest. Yeah.
And I would mimic Dan that no, the water doesn't cancel out the alcohol. It dilutes the drink overall and might change your metabolism, but it doesn't cancel the alcohol content.
Exactly. I completely agree with that.
Okay,
But
thanks.
you need to phrase it. Okay, super. Thank you for asking that. Looking at the prevalence of binge drinking, you can see from this chart that binge drinking is happening throughout the span. This looks at youth grades 9, starting at 9th grade, going all the way up to beyond 65. And the greatest area of age of using is between the ages of 25 and 44. And if we think about that, to me, that makes a lot of sense because that's the point when many young adults are leaving their parental home or their home of origin and kind of spreading their wings and you know, being a young adult and trying to figure out, you know, how does this all work to socialize and be with folks and stuff. And so there's a lot of experimenting that's going on, and also young people tend to bounce back a little bit better from that than the 45-year-olds would as well. And so to me, that makes a lot of sense. And I always like when I look at statistics to say to myself, does this information make sense to me? So I like to kind of get that in there. And a few other things statistically related to binge drinking is that it's twice as common among men than it is for women. And binge drinking is also most common among adults who have a higher household income of $75,000 per year or more, are non-Hispanic white, or live in the Midwest. So those are some things to keep in mind about prevalence and how binge drinking is happening.
Is this data set coming from Iowa or is this national data?
That was national data.
Okay.
And we are going to get into some of the Iowa data. Yep. So these are one of these little facts that we're going to do that help us kind of learn a little bit too and have some discussions. So what do you think about this statement? Binge drinking in the United States. In 2019, 25.8% of people ages 18 and older reported that they engaged in binge drinking in the past month. If you want to shout out it's true or false, if you want to put it in the chat, do respond in some way so that we kind of know what y'all are thinking, and Sam will let me know what she sees in the chat.
Let's see, chat. First one we have is true. Next is false. I think it's higher than 25.8%. Next one's true. True. I think the stat is higher. True. False. It's higher. Those are higher.
Okay.
So it's kind of all over the board. We got another true, another false.
Well, here we go. From the National Institute of Health, they say that this is a true fact in 2019, that it was 25.8% of people ages 18 and older that reported in binge drinking. So to further that, to get some even more updated information, this chart has national binge drinking levels from 2021. So 3 years later, the national average for binge drinking was 15.4, with Iowa's being 20.1. And we are consistently, our state is consistently higher above the national average. And then another fact that's interesting to know is that 1 in 5 adult Iowans are considered binge drinkers. And then that bottom chart just tells you a little bit about comparing heavy drinking and binge drinking. And you can see that they're pretty consistent from 2011 to the last year that it's reported there, 2021, that those numbers stay about the same. And reducing heavy and binge drinking in Iowa and across our nation will help improve the health and safety of Iowans while reducing healthcare costs. And according to this data, percentages of adult Iowans who report heavy and binge drinking has remained steadily higher, as I said earlier.
Kathy, if I can just jump in a minute too, I think in defense of some of the people that there was, differing answers on that last slide. Kathy was pulling off of a wide range of data to give the full scope of how binge drinking is defined, which is the responsible thing to do, to not pull from just one source. But when you look at how the different organizations define binge drinking, as Kathy outlined, there was a pretty big gap from what some, there's a big difference between 4 drinks throughout a 24-hour period versus how some people define binge drinking as 4 drinks within a 2-hour period. So I think in defense of everyone's answer, I think it depends which standard we're going with too. And also one more thing that Kathy said, that Iowa tends to be higher, which is absolutely correct. It's not necessarily a stat that by any means, I want to my disclaimer, I'm just stating as a fact, definitely not something we're proud of. But per capita, Winneshiek County is they labeled us the drunkest county in the state. Highest number of people drinking on what would be considered a heavy basis, obviously on a per capita margin, given the difference between us and Polk County, for example. But she's absolutely right.
Well, that leads right into the next step that we're going to talk about, Dan.
Sorry, I jumped the gun. Sorry.
No, it just led right into it. So looking at the counties that we serve in youth mentoring, because that's kind of where we pull data from, because it tends to be the people that are on these kind of calls. In 2021, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation did examine what was happening in each county in Iowa. And as Dan said, Winneshiek County was one of the highest. And in 2021, we were tied with 2 others as the highest county. And Dan must have some more recent information to show that we unfortunately have risen to the top with that. And so this just kind of shows you the percentage of people who are excessively drinking. So
where does Lynn County fit in?
I don't have Lynn County's data, so can't speak to that.
I'm just curious as to, is there some, does Winneshiek County, I don't know. I live across the river in DeSoto. So my wife and I used to live in Marion, Iowa, but does Winneshiek County have more bars and restaurants than the other counties? I mean, is there a correlation with people?
Yeah, or Kathy, you want me to, or I'll take that. Yeah. As far as does it have more bars, I'm not sure. I know at one point countywide, I want to say we had around 20 bars. I think that number is probably somewhat reduced now. I think what I would attribute to it is what we do have much more of than the average county per capita, per square miles, is the amount of breweries and can't think of, not domestic beers, or they come out specialty beers. I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but anyways, craft beers, that's what I'm trying to say, and the amount of craft breweries. And what we've noticed a major shift in, honestly, the classic, what people would think of as the nightlife, the bar life in Winneshiek County, I would say has drastically gone, to a drastic measure, has gone down. When I look at, 25 years ago when I got in this job and I was at that point working the night shift, I mean, bars were spilling out, overflowing onto the street, constant problems that one might expect that comes from that, fights and everything else. And we've seen a drastic decline in that, and we've seen a massive incline in the amount of day drinking in Winneshiek County. And it's just the style of drinking has very much shifted to more of the craft beer, daytime road trips. People make it a destination to come here to try the beers in Winneshiek County. And to the degree that even the state programs through Governor's Traffic Safety Bureau and Alcoholic Beverage Division, things like that, and enforcement programs, I kind of got into a professional disagreement with them that they wanted us to have our increased patrols out during the late night and overnight hours for alcohol enforcement. And the point I was trying to make to them is, you're behind the times. We need to have that out more between your noon and 6, 7 o'clock. Wow. Is kind of when we're seeing it more often here.
Is that day drinking among younger demographics?
I would say the average age that we see in that, and I don't have this nailed down to just be what I'm seeing as perception. I would say it's kind of that age group that would be consistent with what Kathy talked about, that early 20s to mid 30s would be the crowd we primarily see. I would say our high school age drinking has gone down. Unfortunately, that's kind of morphed. I'd say the drinking aspect of high school age has declined. Unfortunately, no good deed goes unpunished. And I think vaping and THC has taken its place, and that's sharply increased. So it sounds like good news on the front side, but unfortunately it's just been replaced with something else. But no, that's a great question, Paul. And yeah, I think the age group I would say is right spot on with that, mid to early 20s to mid to late 30s. And it's definitely shifted to a daytime. And I that's what I attribute it to. And I'm not by any means knocking our breweries or our craft beer. It's been, in a lot of ways, it's been great for Winneshiek County. And it's something that has brought a lot of commerce and a lot of good, healthy things to Winneshiek County, because they do other things when they're here. So I want to be careful that I'm not knocking anybody's business or anybody's hobby. I'm just simply stating that I think that's the reason, that's why we're there.
Thanks. Super. This is the kind of we want people to be able to share and do that. So good. All right.
Before you move on, we have a couple questions here in the chat.
Great.
The first one is, how are these percentages determined? Are they based on the number of arrests? I don't know who wants to answer that one.
I don't have further information on how the Robert Woods Foundation determined those percentages. I can look at that information and give an idea of how that was developed when I send out materials to groups.
I can't necessarily say. I would have to guess it was done by survey. I don't know how those numbers are developed, but I really don't think they're a result of arrests, because that wouldn't at all be consistent. Our arrest would be drastically lower than the actual number, because obviously everybody that has too much to drink does not end up getting arrested. So I don't think that's where the numbers would have came from.
Okay, and then one more question before we move on. How does the Luther student population figure into these figures, or do they not?
I don't know the answer. I don't know how these numbers came about enough. I couldn't answer that intelligently.
Yeah, and I would say my thought related to that goes back to those statistics that we looked at where binge drinking happens within a certain age group. And Winneshiek County certainly has a larger population of young people in that age group than perhaps Almaquis and Delaware and Howard County do, at least during the school year. So I would think that that would have an influence on that.
I would agree with that. Not only Luther, we have NICC, and
Right.
we have we have arguably 5 or 6 different school districts in Winneshiek County, but we have 3 school districts where their actual school buildings are in Winneshiek County, and we have several others where their districts jump in. And then you add a community college and a liberal arts college. And I would certainly think that those numbers are factored in, but I don't know that for a fact. I'm just going based on demographics would certainly support that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, now we're going to jump into looking at how youth are using. And the Iowa Youth Survey is done usually every 2 years, and they did have a skip year because of COVID. But this information is from 2021 and shares the survey is done for 6th, 8th, and 11th graders. And lots of questions are asked on the Iowa Youth Survey. They want to get an idea of what behaviors people are doing, what attitudes that young people have, how they feel about their communities, suicide, using drugs, what their neighborhood is like. So there's a myriad of topics that they look at. But this particular question asked those 6th, 8th, and 11th graders, how many of you have used or binge drank in the last 30 days? And I was glad to see that the 6th grade number was very low. One thing I will share too is that you will see that this information does not include Howard County, which we normally do report in, but in 2021, no school in Howard County did the Iowa Youth Survey, so we don't have data for that particular year. So use did increase for 8th graders, and it's always a good idea to look at what the state average is, which is that 2% for 8th graders, and that Almaquis County was slightly higher than that. And then you see the jump with the 11th graders, that 9% was the state average, and all 3 of the counties that reported were much higher than that, and some almost double what that state average is. And I think it would be interesting, what you pointed out, to compare this to how vaping and THC levels, our use would compare to this. But this is just simply the data for binge drinking. So we're going to get into health consequences and what happens to your body as you're drinking. And this is just a really good chart to kind of help us understand that the blood alcohol concentration really does affect our judgment, our coordination, our speech, our reaction time, our driving. So looking at this at 0.02%, there is some impairment, but it's not quite as bad as the 0.05, where there's impaired judgment and alertness is affected, and coordination and driving. There can be poor response time and ability to track things. At 0.08%, which is that level of binge drinking, you can see how the impairment just increases even more. Less muscle coordination, judgment goes even further impairment, and reasoning and memory and concentration and the ability to track things. And two, if you're driving, your perception can change, which the perception can change with a lot of things other than driving, and speed control can be an issue. And then the other two areas are even higher, where impairment increases that much more. So this is just kind of something to think about. This is how your body reacts to that alcohol. And none of us walk around with a tool to help us figure out what our blood alcohol content is, but we can observe our friends and help each other out. And if there is any concern related to someone getting in their car and driving or making good decisions, we can be a buddy and offer to give them a ride home, call them a cab, and help in whatever way that is possible with that. So these are kind of some of you had asked in the information in the beginning about when you pre-registered, what are kind of the short-term effects, and that's what this is about. Some other health consequences, which are kind of more long-term, are unintentional injuries, and that can include motor vehicle crashes, falls, burns, alcohol poisoning, and alcohol consumption certainly increases the risk of drowning. And then violence can include homicide, suicide, intimate partner violence, sexual assault, and then there are sexually transmitted diseases, unintended pregnancies, poor pregnancy outcomes, including miscarriage and stillbirth, and then fetal alcohol spectrum disorders certainly can be part of have an effect on a offspring of women who consume alcohol in large degrees. Chronic diseases such as high blood pressure, stroke, heart disease, and liver disease. Cancers can be part of overuse, abuse, and that can include cancer of the breast, liver, colon, rectum, mouth, pharynx, larynx, esophagus, and many other parts of one's body. And there certainly is memory and learning problems, and this isn't all. It also can contribute to anxiety and depression, and alcohol is a depressant, even though people think like, oh, wow, I'm going to go out and get smashed, I'm going to feel better. Well, actually, it's a depressant. And so keep that in mind. Liver disease is a huge part of constant use and abuse, and heart disease is certainly affected. As we said early, stomach bleeding can be part of things, digestive concerns, mental health, brain development, especially with young people. Alcohol misuse can really interfere with the normal adolescent brain development and increase the risk of developing alcohol use disorder, which is a newer term for some folks, what we used to call alcoholism. And death is certainly one of the tragic things that happens with binge drinking and alcohol overuse. So any comments or questions on that particular area? You can be thinking, and if you're typing, Sam, you can let me know what comes up as people have things. So, we do want to look at the economic consequences related to how does this affect one's household, one's well-being. And the Center for Disease Control in 2010 gave this report that $249 billion were lost because of excessive alcohol use. And you can see work productivity was affected, healthcare expenditures, criminal justice costs, collisions. That's kind of the tip of the iceberg. And they don't the CDC doesn't do this type of looking at data very often. So 2010 was the most recent time that they reported that. And then jumping into relationships, how do you think that drinking can affect relationships? You think about families, you think about your work environment. What are some ways that you all have seen that this affects relationships? And Dan, I know that you were going to share a little bit about this as well.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest thing that we see is, the criminal justice side of it, of course, that's always what, goes to people's minds, and rightfully so. We're law enforcement, but, probably to a much larger scale. And in my opinion, much worse than what we see from the criminal charges that we run into on occasion, or what it does to family structures, what it does to people's lives in general, whatever family structure that is. Doesn't have to be in the traditional sense, just whatever that is. And it definitely has massive impacts on the people around them, their work, everything you're saying, Kathy. And, large part of what we deal with is in mental health. It's been one of my biggest pushes as sheriff, and part of mental health. I know they're two separate things, but oftentimes they can go hand in hand, and one can lead to the other, where excessive drinking can lead to mental health issues. Likewise, mental health issues can lead to excessive drinking. And so it's hard to talk about one without the other. Might not be completely fair, but reality, it's what we see. And it's probably more sexy to talk about the people who get arrested, but reality is this slide right here is probably the crux of the problem.
Mm-hmm. And we had a person that commented on Facebook that they wish that the person that was drinking could realize the impact that they have, even though they're being talked to by their mom and their girlfriend and things like that. Folks have to come to that decision ready to make a change, or ready to be helped. And certainly, as you talked about workplace things, if there's a coworker that is missing work because of their drinking, or a teammate that isn't doing things up to par like they used to because of that, then there's a lot of things affected. And Sam, I see you've got a comment.
Yeah, I have a couple things in the chat that I just wanted to say before we moved on from this slide. They were saying that drinking can be crippling for a family for the spending aspect. So money wise, increased domestic violence and divorce, lack of honesty and trust in relationships. Those are just some things that some people are putting in the chat based on how these can affect the relationships.
Awesome. That's terrific. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd say those,
happening, but terrific that people are sharing that.
Yeah, those comments are all very accurate.
In the interest of time, we're going to move forward. And I know this is a tough one to kind of move forward on, because as you said, it's really a difficult thing. I'm going to give you a freebie on this one, because we're going to go by it fast. 1 in 4 adults binge drinking, with 25% doing so weekly. I would ask you true and false, but I'm going to give you this one, folks. It's 6 people. 1 in 6 adults binge drink, with 25% doing so at least weekly. I gave you that freebie because we want to get on with the information that we have, and keep in mind the amount of time that we have today. So we are going to turn things over to Dan and let him share. He's been sharing as we go, which is great. But Dan, what further things would you like to visit about?
Just, and I'll go fast because I know we're on a time crunch here, Kathy. And I think, as you said, we covered a lot of it as we went. So I apologize if I went too early, but, just some basic facts on the law. Public intoxication does not require the 0.08 that is typically thought of. Public intoxication is this strictly acting or appearing intoxicated. Yes, you need to have substance in you, but depending on a lot of factors, I won't get into them. Sometimes at a 0.05, somebody can be intoxicated, which leads them to a criminal charge. It's not saying because somebody walks out of a bar a little bit tipsy, they're going to get arrested, but it's kind of that domino effect that kind of like another person had said on here, similar to the family problems that it causes, that lack of judgment and everything that Kathy was talking about before leads to people to do other things that usually leads to them to get arrested. Seldom in our public intoxication charges is it strictly because they were intoxicated in public. Just reality, I would say that basically never happens. It's always coupled with something else. And so because of what that intoxication led them to do to cause them a disturbance, the charge reverts back to public intoxication just because that's a chargeable offense that we can take them out of the situation and not continue whatever actions they're doing to cause a public safety menace. Likewise with drunk driving, there is more of a hard threshold for that. 0.08, technically, the law says if you can show impairment, that they were impaired and causing a danger to others on the roadway, you can arrest for less than that. Generally, just reality is it very seldom happens. Usually, if there is an intoxication level less than that and they get arrested, typically there's some other kind of substance on board, whether that be THC, marijuana, or something else. Whether that be, we're seeing more fentanyl and opioids and stuff, but usually it's more of a THC, marijuana that's also on board that way. So, as far as the law goes, I actually don't want to focus on that a lot. The people that are causing a public nuisance, obviously we have to protect the rest of the public. They have a right to not be in danger because of someone else. But, moreover, I still go back to the other slide of what it does to work, family, and mental health, and just the destruction of lives, not only their own, but the people around them, and especially the children involved. I'm careful how I say this, but, at least with most adults, they have, not always, I'm painting it with a wide brush, but they at least have some mechanism to be able to help themselves. Maybe not a good mechanism. Maybe they don't always either. We see that a lot of times in domestic situations where there isn't a feeling that they can get out. But certainly, I think it's indisputable with kids that they're captive to the situation. They're prisoners to the situation completely. And they're completely dependent on possibly the parent, or if, worse yet, if both parents are doing this, which is leading to fighting, which is leading to loss of jobs, which is leading to get arrested. And that has a meltdown effect and can destroy the children. And we've seen it time and time again. And that to me is really the heart of the problem. I don't want to downplay the person that walks out of the bar and does something to get arrested, but frankly, I'm far more concerned about what it does inside the home, where the things that we don't know about, the things that aren't getting reported, and the nightmare that children and spouses are having to live because of someone that's engaging in this.
Great. There will be a time to ask questions at the end. In the interest of time, we're going to go and move forward, but that last thought really helps us. Excuse me, I kind of muted myself. I meant to move my cursor and it didn't do that. Sorry about that. We want to get into ways that we can get help. And so there's 211, which is actually based out of Wisconsin. And there's good information, referral information on physical kinds of things, mental health resources, housing, utility, food, employment, suicide, and crisis intervention. They are an option. There's also 988, which is specific to suicide and crisis types of things, but certainly someone dealing with alcohol issues certainly could be at a crisis level. And at a level that they would consider ending their life. So there's good resources there as well. And you can get on their website or call 988 and get information from them. There also is a resource that Sam and I love to talk about, Your Life Iowa. You can call, text, chat 24/7, 365 days of the year. They have information, resources, areas for getting help. And when I say areas for getting help, not only can you find a facility that you could get help from, but you as a family member could go on and either call, chat, text, or check the website out for what can I do in this situation. And so very, very good information. Also, Northeast Iowa Behavioral Health offers individual and group abuse counseling, and they have offices in several locations in Northeast Iowa. And then ASAC, which stands for Area Substance Abuse Prevention, or Iowa Substance Abuse Council, does offer prevention. They have treatment and also have resources for folks, and they have offices specifically in Manchester and Dubuque. So these are areas that we really want to emphasize that there is help for folks. It's a difficult journey to be on when you see someone who is struggling, but you yourself need to get some ideas and get some support for yourself. But also getting help for others is a struggle, but it's also worth it if the person realizes where they're at and the impact that it's having on others that care for them and that love them. So there are some great resources, and we encourage you to check those out. Some prevention strategies related to if you want to avoid binge drinking is, first off, to make a plan, to think about who you're going to be with when you're drinking, because there's somebody that you just go, every time I'm with them, they go, come on, let's drink. And if you can tell yourself, I need to stay away from that person, that's a healthy strategy. You can also say to yourself, should I go to this particular location? Because I know when I'm there that they really encourage, that group of friends encourages, lots of shots and really getting into drinking games and stuff, which just escalates the binge drinking. So think about all those things, who you're with, where you're at, and then make a plan to pace yourself and have an accountability buddy. Just like when you exercise, it's good to have somebody that cheers you on and reminds you of your goals. That can be somebody that you can talk to that as you're out and about to say, hey, I'm really trying to cut back. Can you help me out? And they can be that person that can help you. And you can have more than one buddy. That's a good thing. Set a limit. You can tell yourself, I'm only going to drink so many drinks per hour. You can do a plan of, I'm going to stop drinking at a certain point, but you also don't want to binge drink up to a certain point and think all is going to be well. But do set a limit for things. Have a plan of how to turn down drinks. A great thing to say is, I have a big day tomorrow. No thanks, but no thanks is a good comeback as well. And then you can always walk away from drinks. Some people don't get kind of annoyed by that, but it's your health, it's your well-being. So keep that in mind. And as we said earlier, with those standard drinks, liquor has the highest alcohol content, so you want to avoid those, and if you're going to have a drink, have something that has lesser alcohol percentage in it. Eat and hydrate helps because your tummy's full and it helps with absorption, and that drinking water helps as well. And host or attend a sober party, or it may not be a sober party, but maybe not a party where everybody's going to get smashed kind of thing. And if you're hosting the party, just be clear that it's going to be a good time and you're going to remember it tomorrow. It's a good way to say it. And some things related to kind of what would we do in a situation or community-wide, what could folks do really quickly? There are groups in each of the counties that are in Iowa that are called substance abuse prevention coalitions that help with some of these strategies. And so if you would like to be part of one of those coalitions, contact Helping Services and we will get you connected with someone in your area. Paul, I don't know about other states, what they have, but I bet we could find that out as well. But just to get an idea of some things that can curtail things is if the alcohol prices are too high, people are going to drink less. If the restaurants, bars, breweries, places that have alcohol licenses, that there aren't as many in a particular location, that can help reduce things because like Dan said, when there's too many in one place, violence increases and lots of other things. And then to strengthen the monitoring to make sure that dealers are doing what they should be. The health surveillance is collecting that data and tracking it and making sure that everybody knows what's going on, and implementing screenings. Talks about healthcare professionals can do a screening, and they often do when you go in for any health thing, to ask you about your alcohol use, that perhaps can help curtail things. And then public education, making sure that people understand what's going on. So those are some things that can happen in the community. So we are going to have a time here real quick to have you do an evaluation, and you can see Sam's going to put the link in the chat. If you don't have access to chat, it is www.bit.ly/vd-eval. And we really want you to do it right now. And the reason we do that is we have to collect data for our funders, and we want to know from you what you valued about today, what you think we can do to improve. So I want you to go ahead and do that evaluation right now. And while you're working on that, I'll just do a commercial for some things. Sam and I would love to do a Your Life Iowa presentation for y'all. And you can contact us at mentoring@helpingservices.org to do that. And then we also have some future trainings coming up in January on problem gambling and an emphasis on sports betting. And then in February, how to talk to youth about difficult topics. So those are coming up, and we will let you know about those. And this is the point. We are about out of time. It looks like we went just a bit over. If folks would like to sign off, you are more than welcome to do that, because I know it's a busy day. But if folks would like to ask questions and give comments, that would be certainly appreciated. Thank you all for attending. It was a great group.